Good morning and welcome to the joint meeting of the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means and the Senate Committee on Finance. Committee Secretary, can you please call the roll?
Senators Buck, Canizaro, Neal, Wynn, Stone, Taylor, Titus, Dondero Loop, Assembly Members Anderson, Backus, Brown May, Dickman, Hafen, Hibbets, Howdegi, Koenig, Mosca, O'Neill, Torres Fawcett, Watts, Yeager, and Chair Monroe Moreno.
And I am here. Welcome to everyone joining us here in Carson City, those that are joining us in Las Vegas, and those that are online. We will have public comment at the end of today's meeting, and if you'd like to call in for a public comment, that number is 888-475-4499. The meeting ID is 883-954-73624, and then please press pound. Today, we will have budget closings and reports from the subcommittees on other budget closings. We will start with the Governor's Office of New Americans, and I'll invite them to the table, our staff that are coming to the table for that budget. And I will remind everyone with their electronic devices, please turn them off or put them on mute. Members will be following along on their computers. Please do not take their inattention as they follow along as not being attentive, but simply following along with the meetings. We have a lot to go over today, and our staff has been working extremely hard, so I'm going to say thank you in advance because I know it took a lot of work to get us to this point. So whenever you are ready, you may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Damian Meeks, LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. The first budget that we will be covering is for the Office of New Americans, beginning on page 3 of the packet. This account was previously heard on March 28th. The office promotes the inclusion and integration of immigrants, refugees, and aspiring Americans into civic, economic, and cultural life of Nevada. There are no major issues, and there are 2 other closing items. Fiscal staff recommends the other closing items be closed as recommended by the governor and requests authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions on the Office of New Americans? Not seeing any, I will accept a motion.
So moved as read by staff, Madam Chair.
We have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assembly Member Backus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you so much. Let's move on to the Governor's Office of Energy.
Damian Meeks, for the record. The next account is for the Governor's Office of Energy. This account was previously heard on March 28th. The Governor's Office of Energy advises the Governor on energy policy and serves as the state point of contact with the U.S. Department of Energy's State Energy Program. There are no major issues, and there are 4 other closing items. Fiscal staff recommends the other closing items be closed as recommended by the governor and requests authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions on this budget closing for the Office of Energy? Senator Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just a quick question. Does staff believe that this budget is at all going to be affected by the April 8th executive order, which literally is trying to make sure that the USAG prioritizes any climate change, greenhouse, or gas emissions and funding, and potentially stop enforcement?
Damian Meeks for the record. Thank you for the question. That information has not been communicated to fiscal staff at this time. And to our knowledge, based on prior contact with the agency, they are currently drawing down on all their federal grant funds.
Madam Chair, it's just, being that was last week that order was issued, which was after the hearing, where that conversation happened, it might be of interest, because I believe there's two that are related to energy, and there's another one where they're specifically going after any state activity in those spaces as well. And so there's, I believe, an April 9th and an April 8th order. I'm just bringing it up. I think it's something to monitor and think about.
Thank you so much for the question, Senator Neal. If we have someone from the agency itself that's here in the audience, if you could come to the table and address the question, because I don't believe our staff would have the answer for that.
Good morning, Matthew Brown for the record, Deputy Director of the Office of Energy. After the orders came out on April 8th and April 9th, we did reach out to the Office of, or the Department of Energy, and there has not been any change to our current activity of our active grants from what they said as after that order came out.
Senator Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So is this something that you're monitoring, or are you just taking their word for it and just saying they kept it 100?
No, we are actively Matthew Brown for the record. We are actively monitoring that and in constant communication. We have regular meetings with DOE set up. But as of right now, we are still moving forward as it's going forward as is.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for the question, and I have a question for you. Do you have a backup plan if, for whatever reason, those grants are paused or taken away? Is there a backup plan for this?
Matthew Brown for the record. As we discussed during the budget meeting, there are parts of the program we will move forward with using alternative funding besides the federal funding. We don't have enough funding for the whole program, but there are parts of the program that we find very important to help Nevada and move forward that we will continue with. And if we do see any pullback, we will work with your staff to make sure we identify those portions and then our planning going forward.
Perfect. Members, any other questions for our fiscal staff or for DOE staff member? All right. Thank you so much for answering the questions. Not seeing any other questions, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and so moved as read by staff.
We have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblymember Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. And we'll move on now to the next budget item, the renewable energy account.
Damian Meeks for the record. The next two budgets for the Governor's Office of Energy have not been previously reviewed by the committee, and for which fiscal staff is responsible for developing closing recommendations. I will pause following my presentation of each budget to allow for questions, and then when I have presented the last budget in this group and questions have been addressed, the chair may wish to ask for a single motion for the closing consideration of these two budgets, which is noted on page 13 of the packet.
Thank you.
The Governor's Office of Energy Renewable Energy Account was established in 2009 to receive 45% of property taxes paid from Nevada counties where an abatement had been granted to qualified renewable energy projects. In 2013, the transfer from the counties of the 45% of the property taxes paid was eliminated. This funding source will continue to be available until the 13 remaining projects associated with approved abatements conclude. There are no major issues for this account, and there are 3 other closing items. Closing recommendations for this budget account are included on the summary page in the closing packet.
Thank you, and we can move on to the next one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Damian Meeks, for the record. The next account is for the Governor's Office of Energy Renewable Efficiency Conservation Loan. There are no major closing issues and no other closing items, and closing recommendations are included on the summary page.
Members, are there any questions on the renewable energy account, which was account 1014869, or renewable efficiency conservation loan, which is 1014875? And we have Assembly Member Hafen.
Thank you, Chair. And the question that I have on this is, are there any federal restrictions on these funds, or is it only the state restrictions on the funds under account 1014869?
Thank you for the question. Damian Meeks, for the record. Staff is not aware of any of the restrictions. This may be something that we could more specifically ask the agency. It has not been
He's on
communicated.
his way up the phone event.
Madam Chair, if I could just explain. The reason I'm asking is I did notice that on the other account, it appears there are federal restrictions, and so I'm just trying to understand the difference between the two. If this one's just state and the other one has the federal restriction. Thank you.
For the record, Matthew Brown. Budget account 4869 does not have any federal restriction. That is only state restrictions on that account.
Members, any other questions on either one of the accounts, 1014869 or 1014875? All right, not seeing any. I will entertain a motion for the 2 accounts.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
We have a motion to approve by Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assembly Member Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you so much. And with that, we will move on to the Governor's Office of Economic Development, and the first budget up is 1011526.
Damian Meeks, for the record. Moving on to page 15, the next budget is the Governor's Office of Economic Development. This account was previously heard by the committees on March 28th. There is one major issue. The Governor recommends general fund appropriations of $402,895 over the 2025-27 biennium for one new Outreach and Innovation System Manager position and associated operating expenditures and additional travel and operating expenditures to expand the Office of Entrepreneurship. The Governor's recommendation includes the new Outreach and Innovation System Manager position for $214,979, out-of-state travel expenditures for $17,874, in-state travel expenditures for $15,042, contract expenditures for $95,000, and grant expenditures of $60,000 over the 2025-27 biennium. The office indicates that the proposed expansion would allow it to serve a broader range of entrepreneurs and small businesses, increase its referral capacity, and ensure more equitable access to entrepreneurial resources. During the budget hearing, the agency testified that the new Outreach and Innovation System Manager position would enhance support for entrepreneurs by expanding community outreach and serving as a liaison within GOED to better reach underserved sectors. The governor's recommended budget inadvertently excluded a recommendation for general fund appropriations of $5,467 in FY 2026 and $921 in fiscal year 2027 for schedule-driven expenditures associated with the new position. If this decision unit is approved, fiscal staff would request authority to include these costs as a technical adjustment. The decision is on the bottom of page 17. Do the committees wish to recommend approval of general fund appropriations of $402,895 over the 2025-27 biennium for one new Outreach and Innovation System Manager position and associated operating expenditures and additional travel and operating expenditures for the expansion of the Office of Entrepreneurship as recommended by the governor, and to authorize fiscal staff to make technical adjustments to add general fund appropriations of approximately $5,467 in fiscal year 2026 and $921 in fiscal year 2027 to account for associated equipment and operating costs that were inadvertently excluded from the governor's recommended budget.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions? I am not seeing any. I'm going to make a statement before we go to the motion. As we go through this budget and so many others that we have over the last few weeks for closing and in future closings, we know the economic situation that we're living in as a state right now, and especially the federal unknowns that you've heard me talk about time and time again. So we're going to be very conservative in what the body does in moving forward. So with that, my vice chair, Senator Don Darrell Loop, has a motion for this budget item.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I would move to approve the general fund appropriations of $155,000 over the 25-27 biennium within the decision unit E226, inclusive of contract expenditures totaling $95,000 and grant expenditures totaling $60,000 to support the Office of Entrepreneurship. However, I would move to not approve the new Outreach and Innovation System Manager position and associated operating expenditures recommended in Decision Unit E249 and additional travel expenditures recommended in Decision Unit E226, resulting in a savings of $247,895 over the 25-27 biennium.
Thank you so much. Members, you've heard the motion from Senator Don Darrell Loop, a second from Assembly Member Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries. You can continue.
Damian Meeks, for the record. There are 4 other closing items on page 18, and fiscal staff recommends the other closing items be closed as recommended by the governor and requests authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions? Assembly Member Bacchus?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. And it may have been just an oversight, but I just wanted to bring this up with the committee. We didn't approve the travel under the first motion, and the automatic staff closing also included a booth at a trade show where we weren't permitting the travel. And so I just wanted to raise that as something that we may consider addressing through an alternative motion. With that, Madam Chair, so I would move to approve fiscal staff's recommendation of the closing items to be closed as stated as other items 1, 3, and 4. However, not approving number 2, as well as allowing fiscal staff the authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
I'll second that motion.
Members, we have a motion from Assemblymember Bacchus, a second from Senator Dondero Loop on the other closing items. Any discussion on that motion? One moment. Members, any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye.
Damian Meeks, for the record. On page 19 is the Nevada Film Office budget. There's one major issue. The governor recommends room tax revenues transferred from the Commission on Tourism budget account of $250,498 over the 2025-27 biennium to increase travel, advertising, and marketing expenditures inclusive of the base budget. The total recommended travel, advertising, and marketing expenditures are recommended at $355,044 over the 2025-27 biennium. The recommendation represents a $208,056 increase, or 490.2% increase over the 2023-25 biennium. The proposed increase is intended to restore and expand the Nevada Film Office budget, which was reduced during the pandemic. This recommendation aligns with prior advertising and marketing budgeted expenditures, which averaged $217,808 annually from fiscal year 2011 through 2020. The agency indicates the funding would enable them to produce promotional materials, including commercials, videos, podcasts, advertise in publications, and attend industry events to support and promote Nevada as a film-friendly state. During the budget hearing, the agency emphasized advertising as a key tool in the competitive film market and noted a link between reduced advertising budgets and lower production revenue in the state. As a comparison, the agency referred to the state of Montana with a similar tax incentive, but a $500,000 annual advertising budget, which saw a $150 million in production spending compared to Nevada's $54 million in fiscal year 2024. The agency emphasized that film is a relationship-driven industry and that greater advertising would help Nevada stay competitive. At the bottom of page 21 is the decision for the committees. Do the committees wish to approve room tax revenues transferred from the Commission on Tourism budget account of $250,498 over the 2025-27 biennium to increase travel, advertising, and marketing expenditures as recommended by the governor?
Members, are there any questions? All right, not seeing any, I will entertain a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would move to not approve this particular decision as read by staff, approving the room tax revenues transferred from the Commission on Tourism budget.
We have a motion to not approve by Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblymember Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries.
Damian Meeks for the record. On page 22, there are three other closing items. Closing item number 3 is a funding source change through decision E541. The governor recommends a reduction in room tax revenue transfers from the Commission on Tourism totaling $1.6 million over the 2025-27 biennium, along with a corresponding increase in general fund appropriations of $1.6 million over the 2025-27 biennium, in order to eliminate room tax revenue transfers as a funding source in this budget account. On April 11, 2025, the Joint Subcommittee on General Government voted to recommend room tax revenue transfers continue to be a funding source in this budget account, thereby reducing the need for the governor's recommended general fund appropriations of $1.6 million over the 2025-27 biennium. And given this recommendation by the Joint Subcommittee, the committees may wish to consider not approving Decision Unit E541, which would close this budget account in alignment with the recommendation of the Joint Subcommittee. Fiscal staff recommends other closing items 1 and 2 be closed as recommended by the governor. Other closing item number 3 be closed commensurate with the Joint Subcommittee on the General Government's recommendation related to room tax revenue transfers and requests authority to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you so much. And thank you to the subcommittee for the work that you did on this budget closing. Members, any questions? Not seeing any, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I would move that we close this item as read by staff.
We have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblymember Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries. And that takes us to Budget 153, Workforce Innovation for New Nevada.
Damian Meeks, for the record, beginning on page 23 is the Workforce Innovations for a New Nevada budget. The governor recommends general fund appropriations of $5 million in each year of the 2025-27 biennium to continue funding educational partners to address targeted industry workforce needs. The agency indicates the recommendation would sustain Nevada's workforce development efforts, ensure economic diversification, and align workforce training programs with industry needs. The 2023 legislature, through Assembly Bill 483, approved $5 million in each year of the biennium to expand workforce development programs. And according to the agency, the funding has been used to support industry partnerships and workforce training programs with the Nevada System of Higher Education community colleges. During the biennium, the agency awarded $9.9 million for 17 projects with the capacity to train over 2,000 individuals in advanced manufacturing, transportation, logistics, information technology, and healthcare. If the recommendation is approved, the agency projects to receive up to 10 project applications, and it would allow educational partners to continue expanding training programs in target sectors. During the budget hearing, the committees inquired how the agency evaluated the long-term effectiveness of its programs that it supports. And in response, following the hearing, the agency provided the 2025 WIN biennial report to support program-specific outcomes across multiple community colleges. Additionally, the agency reported that the WIN funding has increased workforce capacity with 2,076 students supported across all 4 community colleges in the current biennium. Of those, at least 65% of the students are expected to secure high-wage jobs from committed employer partners. According to the agency, these results demonstrate program effectiveness through job placement and wage outcomes and highlight the continued use of acquired skills in relevant industries. The decision for the committees is on page 26. Do the committees wish to approve general fund appropriations of $5 million in each year of the 2025-27 biennium to continue funding for the Workforce Innovations for New Nevada account as recommended by the governor?
Thank you so much. We know that the funding in this budget varies from session to session as monies are available. And with that, I'll ask, are there any questions from the members on this budget account? Not seeing any, I will accept a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I would move to approve appropriations of $2 million in each year of the 25-27 biennium to continue funding the Workforce Innovations for a New Nevada account.
We have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblymember Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? We have a nay from Assemblymember Dickman, and the motion does carry. You can go on to
Damian Meeks, for the record. There is one other closing item, and fiscal staff recommends the other closing item be closed as recommended by the governor and requests authority for staff to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Not seeing any. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved as read by staff, Madam Chair.
We have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblymember Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you so much. We'll move on to our next budget closing. That'll be budget 101-1532, the Nevada Main Street Program.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Damian Meeks. The Nevada Main Street Program has one major issue. The governor recommends general fund appropriations of $876,882 over the 2025-27 biennium to increase the funding for the Nevada Main Street Competitive Grant Program. This recommendation would allow the agency to subaward competitive grants focused on economic and community development, provide scholarships to attend the Nevada Main Street National Conference, and conduct in-person training throughout the state. The 2023 legislature, through Assembly Bill AB 481, appropriated general funds of $700,000 for the Nevada Main Street Program. According to the agency, it has utilized the funds to expand its services by offering additional technical assistance and training, providing strategic plans for participating organizations, and adding new Main Street Program communities through a competitive grant program. The agency awarded grants for 23 projects in 16 communities, totaling $662,955 in fiscal year 2024. If this recommendation is approved, the agency would continue providing grants for such projects. During the March 28th budget hearing, the agency testified that last biennium's funding supported the 16 communities, each with Main Street organizations receiving an average grant of about $41,435. The requested increase of $876,882 over the biennium accounts for rising costs, as well as the addition of at least 5 new communities using the same average grant amount as the basis for their projection. The decision is on page 29. Do the committees wish to approve general fund appropriations of $876,882 over the 2025-27 biennium to increase the funding for the Nevada Main Street Competitive Grant Program as recommended by the governor?
Thank you so much. I must admit that the Nevada Main Street program is one of my favorite programs that the state does. But I also understand the financial position that we're in as a state. Members, do you have any questions? Not seeing any, I will accept a motion.
Madam Chair, I would move to approve general fund appropriations of $250,000 in each year of the 25-27 biennium to increase the funding for the Nevada Main Street Competitive Grant Program.
We have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblymember Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? I have a few. We'll start with Senator Titus.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Many of you may remember that this program was really one of the pet programs that former Assemblywoman member Heidi Swank developed, and it has proven to be a very big success. Just written from page 28, the communities that have been touched by this program, from Boulder City to Mesquite to Moapa Valley to the far west side of our state to the far east side of our state. It's truly done as she had envisioned. However, I am going to, and it's disappointing that we cannot fund it to their request, but I am going to support this motion. I do feel that we have to see cuts across the board, and all of us will be touched. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much for that. I totally agree with you. Like I said, it's one of my favorite programs and hate that we can't expand it. Senator Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I ditto the comments from you and Senator Titus. This has been one of the programs that I watch carefully. It's one of the programs that I know hopefully in the future we'll be able to fund. It was something that I constantly bring up related to trying to apply it to projects in West Las Vegas, which happen to be in my district, which are trying to revive an historic area that has a main street. And so I super sad that this has to happen, but I understand. And I'm just so hopeful the future that we'll be able to do something great. And maybe, you know, some magic bucket of money will show up in 2027.
I'm waiting for that money tree every day. Members, any other? Assemblymember Hafen.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just say ditto to what everybody else has already said, but I did have a question on the motion, and hopefully staff can help. The projects that have already been granted awards and are in progress, have they already received the funds? My goal is I just want to make sure that we're not going to like cut funding away from a project midway through the project, because I know some of them take 4 or 5 years to get fully developed. So I just want to make sure that if they have a project in the queue, they have the funding that they need, and that we're not going to be stripping the funding away from those projects mid-development.
Thank you for the question. Yes, that is correct. They will continue to have their funding, and we would not be stripping them.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Not seeing any. With that, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you so much. Moving on.
Damian Meeks, for the record. On page 30, there are 3 other closing items. Fiscal staff recommends the other closing items be closed as recommended by the governor and requests authority for staff to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you so much. With that, I will accept a motion.
Madam Chair, on this item, I would move that the other closing number 1 be closed to include funding for in-state travel expenditures of $18,274 in each year of the 25-27 biennium. Other closing item number 2 be closed to include funding for out-of-state travel expenditures of $4,155 in each year of the 25-27 biennium. And other closing item number 3 be closed as recommended by the governor and provide fiscal staff the authority to make other technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you. We have a motion from Senator Dondera-Loop, a second from Assemblymember Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries. And we'll close that budget, and we'll move on to the Nevada Knowledge Account.
Damian Meeks, for the record. The Nevada Knowledge Account has one major issue. The governor recommends general fund appropriations of $24.3 million and interest revenues of $247,343 over the 2025-27 biennium to increase the funding for the Knowledge Account. The recommendation further increases reserves by $369,957 over the 2025-27 biennium. Inclusive of the base budget, the total recommended general fund appropriations for the Knowledge Account is $33.7 million over the 2025-27 biennium. According to the agency, this recommendation would support existing and new innovation-based projects and is needed to secure federal grants, drive university-led innovation, and expand Nevada's position in certain industries. From fiscal year 2014 through 2019, the account received $5 million per year in general fund appropriations. This was reduced to $2.5 million per year in fiscal year 2020 through 2025. According to the agency, the recommendation would be used to maintain and expand existing programs that drive research, technology, commercialization, economic development in Nevada. The table on page 32 displays the continuing and existing projects that the funding would be used to support. During the March 28th budget hearing, the agency described the account as a driver of high-paying jobs, startup growth, commercialization of university research, and overall economic diversification. The agency noted that the knowledge account plays a role in reducing Nevada's vulnerability to economic downturns by investing in innovation, advanced technologies, and entrepreneurship. In response to the committee's questions about the expected outcomes of the $9.7 million in continued funding for existing projects, the agency testified that the funding in total included $19.6 million in new projects and is projected to result in approximately 6,248 jobs and $36 million in additional state tax revenue. The decision for the committees is on page 34. Do the committees wish to approve general fund appropriations of $24.3 million and interest revenues of $247,343 over the 2025-27 biennium to increase the funding for the knowledge account and increase reserves by $369,957 over the 2025-27 biennium as recommended by the governor?
Thank you so much. This is another account that is doing great work, but knowing the financial situation that we're in, expansion at this time may not be the best idea. So, members, any questions for staff? Assemblymember Hafen.
Thank you, Chair. And I was just looking, pages 31 and 32. On page 32, it's showing that the continuing funding is $9.7 million. But when I look at the previous fiscal years, the general fund appropriations only $5 million, and the balance forward seems to continuously grow. So I'm trying to figure out where the discrepancy is. Are those programs growing in addition to the $5 million to get to the 9.7, or is there a way to help me understand where the money is going and why those two numbers don't seem to match?
Damian Meeks for the record. The projects for the $9.7 million do include some of the funding that was balanced forward.
Thank you for that.
Members, any other questions? Not seeing any. With that, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I agree with your sentiments. We have seen so many great things come from this Nevada Knowledge Account, but with that being said, I would move to approve the base budget general fund appropriations of $2.5 million in each year of the 25-27 biennium to continue funding for Knowledge Account grant projects. And I would further move to not approve Decision Unit E228, which recommends general fund appropriations of $24.3 million and interest revenues of $247,343 over the 25-27 biennium to increase the funding for the knowledge account as recommended by the governor.
We have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblymember Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Sure. Assemblymember Dickman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. When we look at the projections of 6,200 new jobs and $36 million in tax revenue, this is a program that seems to make money for us, so I would have to vote against the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Hafen?
Thank you, Chair. I understand the financial situation that we're in, and so my question is, in the event that there are federal grants that the Knowledge Fund is able to go after, would they have the ability to come back to us during the Interim Finance Committee to request additional matching funds for specific programs?
Damian Meeks for the record, I may defer this question to Ms. Kaufman.
Thank you so much. Ms. Kaufman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this account does have general fund appropriations, so if there was some discussion of an IFC contingency request, they could seek that. There is also a grant matching program that could be provided as well for those purposes.
Assemblymember Haven?
Thank you, Chair. And to my colleague, Assemblymember Dickman's comments, obviously this has been a very successful program, and so I would encourage the Knowledge Fund to continue to go after the grants and to try to come back to the Interim Finance Committee if additional funds are available. And so I don't want them to give up hope on some of the great programs that they've been working on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Senator Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to ditto your comments. This is one of the funds that I've been watching since I've been in the building, and this is what I know to be true. The folks that are moving in this space are super creative. We've been down before, and we've managed to find a way to still produce. And so as much as I want to encourage the entities to keep going after any private partnerships where you can continue the creative space in which you're developing tech that is very advantageous to Nevada, I know that this is just a small moment in time because when this started, there were rough times. And so I just wanted to say that, you know, everything is, I believe everything is going to be fine, and that the UNLV folks and other folks that are participating in this, I wouldn't lose hope. I've met some of the entrepreneurs, as you guys have as well, and that, you know, just keep the faith. It'll all keep going.
I do agree with you, and knowing that we are being consistent in the general fund appropriations of the 2.5 million as we were in FY24 and FY25, and seeing what they've been able to do with those funds, I wish that we could expand the program to the 24.3 million, but that's just not able to at this time. So, seeing no other discussion on this motion, all in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I have Assembly Member Dickman as a nay. No other nays. This motion does carry. And with that, we will move on to the next budget.
Damian Meeks, for the record, the next budget was previously heard on March 28th for the Procurement Outreach Program. There's one major issue. The governor recommends general fund appropriations of $60,404 and Federal Department of Defense grant funds of $112,179 over the 2025-27 biennium to provide salary increases for 7 existing positions. The salary increases would address an increased workload and ensure job satisfaction, retention, and productivity for the Nevada Apex team. According to the agency, the Apex team duties and responsibilities have evolved and increased from primarily being focused on general government procurement assistance to expanding to include more specialized support for small businesses. The agency testified during the budget hearing that the proposed salary increases were based on salary metrics from the National Contract Management Association's salary survey, which showed that current staff wages were significantly below national and internal benchmarks. Following the budget hearing, the agency provided revised salary information after identifying an inadvertent miscalculation in the governor's recommended budget affecting the 5 government contract advisor positions. If this decision unit is approved, the Governor's Office of Economic Development has asked for consideration of a technical adjustment to increase the annual salaries for 3 of the 5 government contracts advisor positions to align expenditures for all 5 positions with an annual salary of $87,212. This adjustment would increase personnel costs by $40,816 over the 2025-27 biennium, funded with general fund appropriations of $14,286 and Federal Department of Defense grant funds of $26,530. The decision for the committees is at the bottom of page 37. Do the committees wish to approve general fund appropriations of $60,404 and Federal Department of Defense grant funds of $112,179 over the 2025-27 biennium to provide salary increases for 7 existing positions as recommended by the governor, and to authorize fiscal staff to make technical adjustments in order to align all government contract advisor position annual salaries to $87,212 in fiscal year 2026 and fiscal year 2027, including additional general fund appropriations of approximately $14,286 and Federal Department of Defense grant funds of $26,530 over the 2025-27 biennium.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions? Not seeing any, I will accept a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would move to not approve the general fund appropriations of $60,404 and Federal Department of Defense grant funds of $112,179 over the 25-27 biennium to provide salary increases for 7 existing positions as recommended by the governor, and to authorize fiscal staff to make technical adjustments in order to align all government contract advisor position annual salaries as read by staff.
Thank you. We have a motion from Senator Don Darrell Loop, a second from Assembly Member Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have Assembly Member Dickman as a nay, and the motion does carry.
Thank you, Damian Meeks, for the record. On page 38, there are 2 other closing items. Fiscal staff recommends the other closing items be closed as recommended by the governor and requests authority for staff to make technical adjustments as necessary.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions? Not seeing any. I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So moved by, as read by staff.
Thank you. We have a motion from Senator Don Darrell Loop, a second from Assembly Member Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you so much.
Damian Meeks, for the record. The next 3 budgets for the Governor's Office of Economic Development have not been previously reviewed by the committee, and for which fiscal staff is responsible for developing the closing recommendations. I will pause following my presentation of each of the budgets to allow for questions, and when I've presented the last budget in this group and any questions have been addressed, the chair may wish to ask for a single motion for the closing consideration of these 3 budgets, which is noted on page 45 of the packet. With that, the first account is the Nevada SSBCI program. This account is the Small Business Credit Initiative program, which helps to increase credit availability for small businesses. There are no major issues and there are no other closing items. And the closing recommendations for this budget account are included on the summary page, as previously mentioned.
Members, before we move to the next budget, do you have any questions? Senator Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know you said there were no major closing issues, but they're still sitting on a lot of money. And so I'm wondering, how successful have they been with getting it out of the door? Because we had like a big event with Envy Grow to have them participate, I think it was about a year ago, and none of our businesses have actually been able to receive anything from SSBCI. And so, they're still sitting on a large amount of cash. And so I'm just wondering, are we not questioning how they've had this money for a long time and it's not really going out the door?
Thank you so much for the question, Senator Neal. If we have someone from the agency that can come to the table to answer that question, that would be most helpful. Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Senator Neal has made a great observation. We find ourselves sometimes in the unusual predicament of competing against other federal programs, particularly the SBA, and whose terms and conditions and pricing over the last 18 months have been more favorable in that space. We've made an alteration to the program. One of the more successful programs or features of that program is our ability to provide collateral. So illustratively, if somebody comes forward and says, I'd like a $100,000 letter of credit from a private banking institution, and the institution says, well, if you could put $25,000 of collateral in our bank, we would be interested in providing that collateral or that piece of credit for you. We can then place that from this program, place that collateral within the bank, and it remains the property of the state unless the borrower is deficient in some ways. We recently have been able to work with the Department of Treasury and raise that collateral limit to as high as, I believe, 85%. Carson Heinz is not here, and he's our expert in that. But we've made a significant change in our ability, in the amount of capital that we've been able to provide, and we anticipate that will start to move that money out the door.
Could you state your name for the record for our
I
committee
apologize.
secretary? Thank you.
Yes, my oversight. I apologize. I'm Tom Burns. I'm the Executive Director of the Governor's Office of Economic Development.
Thank you. Senator Neal, follow-up?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So with you raising that collateral piece up to 85%, does that indicate that you have some flexibility to go back and try to have a conversation with, I guess, the Department of Commerce to try to amend some terms of this program so it can actually fit Nevada businesses?
Senator Neal, Tom Burns for the record. Thank you for the question. Exactly. We have approached the Department of Treasury, and they have agreed with our amendment. And that's been within the last 60 days.
Madam Chair, is there any way that staff can get ideas of what those amendments are? So if there are any future amendments over the session and interim, that there can be maybe small business conversations or leaders or ecosystems of diverse backgrounds so that those amendments can fit the businesses who actually want to access this program and use it.
Madam Chair, for the record, Sarah Kaufman. Yes, we can follow up with that during the interim.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kaufman. Members, any other questions? All right, not seeing any, then we'll move on to the Small Business Enterprise Loan account.
Damian Meeks, for the record. the small business enterprise loan. The fiscal staff is responsible for developing the closing recommendations for this budget account. There are no major issues, and there are no other closing items.
Thank you. Before moving on, members, do you have any questions on this budget account 1524? All right, not seeing any, then we'll move on to the last budget account, and this one would be the Rural Community Development 1528.
Thank you, Damian Meeks. On page 42 is the Governor's Office of Economic Development Rural Community Development Budget. There are no major closing issues, and there are 3 other closing items. And the closing recommendations are included on the summary page in this packet.
Members, before we go to a motion, is there any questions on budget account 1528? Not seeing any. Thank you so much. We'll go to the summary.
Thank you. There are 3 other closing items. Oops, apologize. One moment. Sorry, I misspoke. There are no other closing items. Apologize. And, okay.
If you'd like to do the summary for the closing for
Sorry.
budget 1521, 1524, and 1528, that would be great.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The fiscal staff recommends that the following budget accounts be closed as recommended by the governor and requests authority for staff to make technical adjustments as necessary. Budget account 101-1521, GOED, Nevada State Small Business Credit Initiatives SSBCI Program, 101-1524, GOED, Small Business Enterprise Loan, 101-1528, GOED, Rural Community Development.
Thank you so much. I think we've gone through all the questions for all 3 budget items. So with that, I will entertain a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I would move that we close as read by staff.
We have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblymember Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you so much. You had a lot on the agenda today. We appreciate your hard work.
Thank you.
And with that, members, we'll move on to the next item on today's agenda, and that's the Department of Indigent Defense Services, and invite staff to the table.
All right, good morning, Madam Chair, committee members. For the record, my name is Colby Nichols, Program Analyst with LCB Fiscal Analysis Division, here today to assist the committee with the portion of today's agenda for the Department of Indigent Defense Services, or DIDS for short. DIDS consists of 2 budget accounts. Both were previously heard before this body on March 7th. Begin with the Department of Indigent Defense Services budget account, which begins on page 47 of your closing packet. There are 3 major issues associated with this account, the first of which is a recommendation for a new Administrative Services Officer position, funded with general fund appropriations of approximately $84,000 in fiscal year 26 and approximately $105,000 in fiscal year 27. The intent of the recommended position is to provide high-level fiscal management and budgeting support for the agency, with the goal of freeing up the Executive Director and the Deputy Directors to perform oversight and compliance duties. The recommended new position would perform management of the agency's budget, review of quarterly and annual financial reports from the counties, and serve as the agency's single point of contact with the Administrative Services Division, which provides some budgetary support to the agency, In reviewing the most recent report from the court-appointed monitor for the Davis stipulated consent judgment, that report did include concerns that various functions associated with oversight and compliance were maybe stalled at the agency due to some staffing issues. So again, the intent is to create a dedicated position and free up some more time for the existing high-level staff to perform those compliance and oversight duties. During the budget hearing, the agency was asked to clarify what duties this recommended new position would perform if approved, and which would continue to be performed by the Administrative Services Division. In response, the agency testified that the new position would assist in duties specifically related to the agency's programmatic operations. Again, that would be review of indigent defense expense reports from the counties as well as billings from contracted attorneys. New position would also serve as the supervisor of the 3 existing fiscal management staff at the agency, and the Administrative Services Division would continue to assist with duties such as budget building, interfacing with the state's accounting and human resources systems, and preparation of work programs. The committees further inquired how the recommended new position would improve the agency's ability to comply with the Davis consent judgment, and in response, the agency testified that having this additional staff would improve the agency's ability to perform various Davis-related duties concerning oversight and compliance. The decision for the committees is whether to approve general fund appropriations of $83,479 in fiscal year 2026 and $104,586 in fiscal year 27 for a new administrative services officer position as recommended by the governor.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Not seeing any. With that, I will accept a motion.
So moved as read by staff, Madam Chair.
We have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblymember Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. You can continue. Thank you.
Thank you again. This is Colby Nichols for the record. The second major issue, which begins towards the bottom of page 48 of your packet, is a new social worker support services program. The governor is recommending transfer of opioid settlement revenues from the Fund for a Resilient Nevada, totaling $300,000 in each fiscal year of the 25-27 biennium, to fund contract costs to establish a new social worker support services program. The intent here is to contract with the Nevada Public Health Foundation, which would initially perform some research and development on exactly what kind of services and where these would be provided. The agency anticipates needing about 6 months for that phase, following which individuals are estimated to begin receiving services around January of 2026. The program would eventually establish service providers for public defenders to utilize on behalf of their clients who are either experiencing or at risk of experiencing substance use disorders to address areas of concern in their lives. Those can be housing, employment, mental health issues that may contribute to their involvement in the criminal legal system. While the agency has indicated that approval of this recommendation is not directly related to the Davis consent judgment and compliance with, it does believe the new program may eventually aid in compliance by allowing attorneys to spend more time on legal representation as opposed to finding and connecting clients to services. During the budget hearing, the committees asked how the agency planned to prioritize what services to support and where, based on that $300,000 in recommended funding. In response, the agency testified that it anticipated targeting approximately 1 to 3 rural counties during the initial planning and development phase, and that the Nevada Public Health Foundation had already initiated conversations with Lander County regarding the use of the funding for this purpose. Essentially, one of these counties would serve as the initial pilot county for the program, and then the agency would consider expanding services out based on how that rollout was performed. At this time, the agency is unable to estimate the overall need statewide, but the intent of this recommendation was also to include data collection to begin that process. The committees also inquired how the agency would fund additional services if the need identified actually exceeded that $300,000 that's included in this recommendation. And in response, the agency testified that it anticipated requesting additional funding in future biennia based on those data collection efforts. Also, during the budget hearing, there was a conversation about whether the agency would be able to balance forward opioid settlement funding following the budget hearing and conversation, both with the agency as well as the Fund for Resilient Nevada, it would appear that the transfers from the Fund for Resilient Nevada, those are essentially done on a reimbursement basis. So the ability to balance forward wouldn't necessarily be needed. Finally, the committee's asked the agency to explain how approval of this decision unit would aid in meeting the Davis consent judgment. Again, the agency reiterated it's not explicitly related to Davis compliance, but the idea is to maybe improve compliance by freeing up more attorney time to work on core indigent defense service functions as opposed to connecting clients to services. The decision for the subcommittees, as included on page 50, is whether they wish to approve opioid settlement revenue and expenditure authority of $300,000 in each fiscal year of the 25-27 biennium, transferred from the Fund for a Resilient Nevada budget account to fund contract costs to establish this new social worker support services program for public defenders, as recommended by the governor.
Thank you so much. I can't tell you how many times we've heard opioid settlement during this legislation. It's been kind of wild. Members, any questions? Not seeing any. With that, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would move to not approve the opioid settlement revenue and expenditure authority of $300,000 in each fiscal year of the 25-27 biennium transferred from the Fund for Resilient Nevada to fund contract costs to establish a new social worker support services program for public defenders as recommended by the governor.
Second.
We have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblymember Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. You can continue.
The third major issue associated with this count is a budget amendment that was submitted following the budget hearing, discussion of which begins towards the bottom of page 50 of your packet. This is Budget Amendment A255091008. During the budget hearing, the agency did testify that it intended to transmit a budget amendment. This budget amendment is recommending general fund of appropriations of $166,250 in each year of the 25-27 biennium, and that's to fund contract costs to establish a contracted council administrator in Nye County for indigent defense services. The position's duties would include selecting counsel for cases requiring appointed indigent defense counsel, managing the workload and caseload for those contract attorneys, and review and approval of indigent defense costs in Nye County. Again, the agency did testify to their intent to transmit such a budget amendment during the budget hearing. This new position was explicitly mentioned in the most recent report from the court monitor, and it's also included in Nye County's approved plan for the provision of indigent defense services. However, based on what the agency has communicated, Nye County has been unable to fill this position. So this budget amendment is essentially requesting for the state to take over and fill that position. The primary duty would be to make sure that cases are being opened, closed, and moved through the legal case management system known as Legal Server in a timely fashion. But this position would also serve as a mentor and, again, make sure that cases are allocated to attorneys with the appropriate qualifications and experience. So the decision for the committees, as included on page 51, is whether the committees wish to approve general fund appropriations of $166,250 in each year of the 25-27 biennium to fund the costs associated with retaining a contracted council administrator in Nye County, as recommended by Budget Amendment A255091008.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions? Not seeing any. I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I would move to approve as read by staff.
We have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblymember Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. You can continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Colby Nichols for the record. As we move on to the other closing items, you'll see some of those are contained in a table at the bottom of page 51. There are 3 there. And then a few others I would just briefly note. Other closing item number 5, this is an adjustment to the funding to reimburse counties for indigent defense costs in excess of their calculated maximum contribution amounts. Other closing item number 6 is a recommendation to transfer costs for post-conviction relief from the State Public Defender's Office budget account, which we'll be discussing shortly, to this budget account. Overall, this is budget neutral for the Department of Indigent Defense Services. This is basically categorizing where those costs are paid out of. However, as statute currently identifies that it's the Office of the State Public Defender that is required to pay for these, approval of this decision unit to transfer the costs as well as the companion in the State Public Defender budget account would be contingent upon passage and approval of legislation that amends those statutes to change the responsibility. To effectuate this change, the Governor's Finance Office has submitted a bill draft request, which I believe has since been introduced as AB 541 and referred to the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means. And finally, on other closing item 7, which is at the top of page 53, one of the functions that DIDS performs out of this budget account is a law student supervision and essentially a jobs training placement program for law students and recent law graduates. This is funded via transfer from the Department of Employment Training and Rehabilitation. In discussing this with the DETR analyst, we had identified that the contract, the interagency contract to perform this program, is currently set to expire at the end of fiscal year 2026. And so you'll see discussion in other closing item 7, recommending a series of technical adjustments to align what's in the budget with what the authority that's actually remaining for the contract, as well as reflect the contract's anticipated expiration at the end of fiscal year 2026. However, both agencies, DIDS and DETR, have communicated that they do intend to continue this program. So at this point, that funding amount is unknown, so it would likely be done via a series of work programs during the interim. And this technical adjustment would also be contingent upon approval of companion adjustments in that workforce development budget account, which is currently scheduled for closing by the Joint Subcommittee on Human Services on April 18th. So fiscal staff would recommend that other closing items 1 through 5 be closed as recommended by the governor, that other closing item 6 be closed as recommended by the governor, contingent upon passage and approval of AB 541 or other enabling legislation, and that other closing item 7 be closed with the technical adjustments noted related to funding for the LASSO program, and request authority to make other technical adjustments to this budget as necessary.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions? Not seeing any, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I would so move as read by staff.
We have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblymember Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries. Moving on.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Again, this is Colby Nichols for the record. Moving on to the second budget account for DIDS, this is the Public Defender's budget, discussion of which begins on page 57 of your packet. The Office of the State Public Defender provides currently all indigent defense services for White Pine County, as well as limited services in various other rural counties. However, effective July 1st, 2025, Humboldt County will be transferring the responsibility for the provision of all indigent defense services to the office, which represents the major closing issue for this account. The governor is recommending total net revenues of approximately $136,000 in fiscal year 2026 and approximately $89,000 in fiscal year 27. This would fund various costs associated with the establishment of a new state public defender's branch office in Humboldt County. This recommendation includes various in-state travel, operating equipment, information services, and training expenditures. These costs would be funded through county fee revenues collected from Humboldt County in the amount of $540,207 in each year of the forthcoming biennium, which is being partially offset by general fund reductions of $404,074 in fiscal year 2026 and $451,299 in fiscal year 2027. I would note that this decision unit does not include any personnel for the office. The intent is to reassign existing vacant positions that were previously used to support Carson City, which no longer utilizes the State Public Defender's Office, and to reassign those positions to this new Humboldt County office. So if you look, there is a bulleted list on page 58 that's discussing the costs that are included in the enhancement. Currently, Humboldt County is utilizing contracted attorneys. The intent is to transition the responsibility to the state, and then the state would fill those positions previously used to support Carson City to support Humboldt County. Towards the bottom of page 58 is a second bulleted list that's covering the positions that would be intended to support it. Again, this is not necessarily included in the enhancement, but I thought it was important to mention because it reflects the staffing, anticipated staffing for this new office. Regarding the county fee revenues that are included here, this represents Humboldt County's calculated maximum contribution amount for fiscal year 2024. So this decision unit is essentially baking that into the budget. Any costs associated with the provision of indigent defense services in Humboldt County in excess of this amount would be funded by general fund appropriations made to this budget account. During the budget hearing, the committees inquired whether the recommended increase in in-state travel authority that's included in this decision unit should be considered duplicative of the amount that's included in decision unit E300, which we'll be discussing as another closing item number 2. However, the agency confirmed that the amounts were not duplicative, clarified that the recommended travel cost for Humboldt County was based on actual fiscal year 24 in-state travel costs for the agency, which represented the agency's best estimate of the actual need for travel. As the agency does experience significant travel costs, as staff may often be required to commute to and from metropolitan areas within the state to rural areas. In addition, the committee inquired about how the agency determined the number of positions anticipated to support Humboldt County, and in response, the agency testified that the number of attorneys was based on information included in a workload study that was mandated as part of the Davis v. Nevada consent judgment. The study had identified a need for 5 attorney positions in Humboldt County. You'll see that's what's being recommended when those base budget positions are being reassigned. However, if the agency found the number of attorneys insufficient, in the event that they might need alternative representation in cases where there might be a conflict of interest, they would also consider utilizing contract attorneys to increase the office's staffing. In addition, the administrative and investigative staff that are recommended are based on essentially attorney to support staff ratios that were also included in that workload study. Also, during the budget hearing, the committees inquired how the agency was addressing the challenges of recruiting and retaining positions in the rural areas in the state, and whether the agency would be able to fill these positions for the Humboldt County office in a timely manner. And in response, the agency testified that the new state public defender was confident on being able to fill the positions in a timely manner and had actually been able to fill a vacant deputy public defender position for the White Pine County office since his appointment in January. As Humboldt County currently uses contract attorneys to provide indigent defense services, the agency had also testified that it's already in contact with those attorneys who might be interested in continuing to provide public defense in Humboldt County. As I referenced previously, there was a discussion regarding how costs associated with this office would be funded in the event that it exceeds Humboldt County's calculated maximum contribution. And again, the general fund appropriations made to this budget would be used to support those costs in excess of that calculated amount. Finally, the committees asked the agency to confirm that the general fund reductions that are included in this recommendation would not negatively impact the agency's ability to provide indigent defense services elsewhere in the state. And in response, the agency clarified that those general fund reductions, these are essentially adjustments made to reflect when these positions were supporting the Carson City office prior to the establishment of the Davis agreement, prior to Davis and the establishment of the maximum contribution amounts for counties, positions were funded using a 75%, 25% split between the county and the state. Doesn't necessarily apply anymore, but that's how the positions are funded in the base budget. So again, the funding adjustment that's included in this recommendation is intended to correct that and correctly align the costs for the positions with how the new funding structure works under Davis. So the decision for the committees is whether they wish to approve the governor's recommendation for $1.1 million in county fee revenues collected from Humboldt County, as well as a reduction of $855,373 in general fund appropriations over the 25-27 biennium to establish a new state public defender's office in Humboldt County, which would result in a net revenue and expenditure increase of $1,133 in fiscal year 2026 and $88,908 in fiscal year 2027, funded with county fee revenues collected from Humboldt County.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions? Not seeing any, I'll accept a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So moved as read by staff.
We have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblymember Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. We can continue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, Colby Nichols. That concludes the major issues. Moving on to the other closing items for this account, which begins towards the bottom of page 60. There's one included in the table there. Other closing item 2 is the additional in-state travel authority. Again, in discussing this with the agency, this is not considered duplicative. This is actually a recommendation to put authority for travel expenses that might have erroneously been excluded from the base budget. And then other closing item 3, I would just note, this is this budget's companion to that for the transfer of post-conviction relief. So as that was approved for the previous budget, we would suggest the same for this one to be consistent. So fiscal staff would recommend that other closing items 1 and 2 be closed as recommended by the governor, that other closing item 3 be approved consistent with the committee's decision in the companion decision unit for the previous budget account, and would request authority to make further technical adjustments to this budget as needed.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions? Not seeing any, I will accept a motion.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I so move as read by staff.
We have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblymember Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time this morning.
Members, that is the last of the budget closings, and we'll move on to reports from the subcommittees on budget closings. We have the Commission on Mineral Resources, followed by the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, and we'll end with the Colorado River Commission. And welcome staff to the table. Good morning. All right, I think we can get started. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Justin Luna for the record, Program Analyst with the LCB Fiscal Analysis Division. I'll be presenting the Joint Subcommittee Closing Report for the Commission on Mineral Resources, Division of Minerals. The Joint Subcommittee on General Government has completed its review of the Division of Minerals budget account for the 2025-27 biennium. Following describes the more significant recommendations of the Joint Subcommittee. Division of Minerals Budget Account 4219, the Joint Subcommittee recommended closing the agency's budget account as recommended by the Governor with the recommended funding of $37,000 in each year of the 2025-27 biennium for an increase in membership dues for the Interstate Mining Compact Commission to allow the state of Nevada to become a full member of the commission, with the governor as the official representative and the ability to delegate his or her representation contingent upon the passage and approval of enabling legislation. The joint subcommittee also recommended approval of all other closing items, inclusive of various technical adjustments to change the vehicle replacement from fiscal year 2027 to fiscal year 2026, to correct the reallocation of expenses among categories, and to correct schedule-driven vehicle expenses. The subcommittee further authorized fiscal staff to make other technical adjustments to the Division of Minerals budget account as necessary. That concludes my closing report.
Members, any questions on this closing report? All right, not seeing any, then I'll accept a motion to accept the closing report.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I would move as stated.
We have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblymember Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you so much. Next up, we have the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training. Good morning. Thank you. I think we can get started.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nancy Morris, Fiscal Analysis Division. I will be presenting the Joint Subcommittee on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation Closing Report for the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training. The Joint Subcommittee on Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation has completed its review of the Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training budget account for the 2025-27 biennium. The closing recommendations of the subcommittee resulted in no change in general fund appropriations over the 25-27 biennium. The following describes the recommendations of the joint subcommittee. For the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission budget account 3774, the subcommittee recommended approval of the governor's recommendation for general fund appropriations of $111,138 in fiscal year 2027 for annual fees for an update to the records management and tracking system, contingent upon passage and approval of legislation that includes one-time funding for the implementation costs of an update to the system, and authorized fiscal staff to make technical adjustments as necessary. This concludes my report, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Members, any questions? Kind of a short report. Not seeing any, I'll accept a motion to accept the report.
So moved, Madam Chair.
We have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assemblymember Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you so much. And that takes us to our last report of the morning, and that is the Colorado River Commission. And welcome back to the table. Okay, I think we can get started.
Thank you. Hello again. Justin Luna for the record. Now I'll be presenting the Joint Subcommittee closing report for the Colorado River Commission. The Joint Subcommittee on General Government has completed its review of the Colorado River Commission budget request for the 2025-27 biennium. Subcommittee recommended approval of the following closing actions. Colorado River Commission Budget Account 2964490. The Joint Subcommittee recommended approving the Governor's recommendation for cost allocation reimbursements transferred from the agency's Power Delivery Project budget account totaling $818,053 over the 2025-27 biennium to add one new unclassified power facilities electrician position and two new unclassified senior power facility electrician positions, along with associated operating costs to provide additional support for the agency's power delivery group. This group performs the operation and maintenance of the transmission system, providing electrical power to the Southern Nevada Water Authority's water pumping and treatment facilities that are essential for services within the Las Vegas Valley. The subcommittee recommended approval of all other closing items within the Colorado River Commission budget account as recommended by the governor, with authority for fiscal staff to make technical adjustments as necessary. Joint Subcommittee also recommended closing the following Colorado River Commission budget accounts as recommended by the governor. Research and Development Account 296-4497, Power Delivery Project 502-4501, and Power Marketing 505-4502. Subcommittee authorized fiscal staff to make technical adjustments to the Colorado River Commission budget accounts as necessary. That concludes my report.
Thank you so much. Members, any questions? Not seeing any, and just want to say thank you to the General Government Subcommittee and Public Safety, Natural Resources, and Transportation Subcommittee for the work that you all did on these budgets. So with that, I will accept a motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So moved.
We have a motion from Senator Dondero Loop, a second from Assembly Member Bacchus. Any discussion on the motion? Not seeing any. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you so much. And that brings us up to the last item on today's agenda, and that is public comment. If there's anyone here in Carson City that would like to make public comment, I invite you to the table. I don't see anyone in Las Vegas, but if you're joining us by phone and you'd like to call in for public comment, our number is 888-475-4499. Our meeting ID is 883-953-73624, and then please press pound. Not seeing anyone come to the table here in Carson City and not seeing anyone in Las Vegas broadcast. Do we have anyone joining us on the phone line that would like to make public comment at this time?
Chair, the public lines are open and working, but we have no callers to give public comment at this time.
With that, members, our meeting is adjourned, and I will see you all tomorrow morning.